This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News. I'm Sophie Ikenye. Our top stories. In a first in Kenya, the Finance Minister Henry Rotich is arrested on corruption charges over a major dam project scandal. Clashes take place between Nigerian police and members of the Muslim Shia group, the Islamic Movement of Nigeria. Challenges of living with disability in Senegal. We have a special report. And in sport is au revoir, Hervé Renard, as a Frenchman leaves his post as Morocco coach. Thanks for joining us on Focus on Africa from BBC World News. We begin in Kenya, where the country's Finance Minister Henry Rotich has been arrested for alleged corruption and abuse of office. And the Director of Public Prosecution who issued the arrest warrant wants the minister and 27 other government officials charged for fraud involving more than $600 million. Now, this is one of the highest profile arrests ever made in Kenya since the prosecutor took office slightly over a year ago. Well, the BBC's Ferdinand Omondi has been following developments for us. Ferdinand, help us understand how we got here, because this is quite a high-profile case.
Yes, this is one of the highest profile officials who've been brought here, but it's against a promise by the president to fight corruption at all costs. And now his finance minister could be in the dogs. Why? $450 million meant for the construction of 2 dams. But the prosecutor told me today, after he made his announcement, that he believes this tender was awarded irregularly to an Italian firm, which first of all was facing voluntary liquidation, and secondly, wasn't given by fair competition. He's also looking at the possibility of asking questions why this tender, which was originally meant to be $450 million on paper, eventually rose to about $600 million. So he has reason to believe that there was a lot of financial misconduct, which cost Kenyan taxpayers a lot of money.
Well, but given the country's history on corruption prosecutions, how confident is the DPP about this case?
Well, he says he has enough evidence to make sure that he gets a proper prosecution and that he might get a guilty verdict. He's very confident about that. But he says if this conviction is not concluded in time, you will have to look at the judiciary, not him. This is what he said.
We've put a lot into it. For the first time, we've used experts who are going to put the evidence before court. And we are also having a special prosecutor who will lead the prosecution on behalf of the ODPP. And we've taken this case very, very seriously because it has a lot of implication on our financial standing as a country.
Yes, and this case is also raising a lot of political heat already. Senior politicians, including a senator, said this is political and targeted at certain communities. The prosecutor had anticipated this, and he told me that this is not the case. The problem is some official office holders in Kenya appoint too many people from their own communities. So when investigators find that certain members of one community are mostly targeted, and he says now next in line to be targeted will be these officers who practice tribalism and nepotism in public office.
Ferdinand, I know that Kenyans have been up in arms, really, about the alleged corruption that's been going on within government. I wonder what this latest development what kind of reaction they've had to this.
Well, some are clapping their hands and some are saying this is just a public relations stunt. Remember, like I told you earlier, these are high-profile cases. You have to give it to the public prosecutor that before he came into office, some of these names were deemed to be untouchable, but he's been able to open cases, including against a sitting Supreme Court judge. But ultimately, what he'll be judged by is not the number of people he takes to court successfully, but what number of people actually get successful prosecution and probably serve time. And this is what many Kenyans want to see, for them to believe that the war on corruption is actually going on.
All right, Ferdinand Omondi for us in Nairobi. Thank you. Now, deadly clashes have broken out in Nigeria's capital, Abuja, between police and members of the Muslim Shia group known as the Islamic Movement of Nigeria. It happened when police tried to break up the protests. Let's get the latest on this with Ishaq Khalid in Abuja. Ishaq, what happened?
Well, basically, the members of Islamic Movement of Nigeria, the Shia group here in Nigeria, came out again to protest and demand the release of their leader here in the capital, Abuja, and then they clashed with the police. A spokesperson for the Shia group told me that they have recovered 11 bodies of their members, and all of them had gunshot wounds, and then there are also more than 30 wounded members of the Shia group. But so far there's no statement from the police about the casualties, but they tweeted saying that the protesters were violent and the officers, the police personnel, acted to bring the situation under control. And in the latest tweet, the police is saying that the situation has indeed been brought under control, and they're going to release details of actually what happened during the protest.
I wonder, though, what Nigerians are making of all this, because these protests have been taking place over a period of time, but this is when it's become a bit more bloody, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. This is likely to be the bloodiest in recent weeks. The Shia members have been coming out to say that their leader, Sheikh Ibrahim el-Zakzaki, should be released. And they say that a court gave an order for his release, but the government is ignoring it. But the Nigerian presidency issued a statement over the weekend saying that it has no hand in the continued detention of Sheikh Ibrahim el-Zakzaki. It's a matter in court, and the trial is taking place in Kaduna State, where he was arrested following deadly clashes between the army and the Shia members in 2015. More than 300 people were killed. Shia members were killed at that time, according to human rights groups like Amnesty International. So many Nigerians are wondering why this situation has continued, and they are very concerned that it needs to be handled very carefully, because if it continues the way it is at the moment, it's likely to get worse.
All right, Ishaq Khalid for us in Abuja. Thank you. Now, it's been some tough few days for South African politics as more claims have emerged over political corruption. Today, the country's highest court ruled that the public protector charges of investigating corruption lied under oath and acted in bad faith. Busisiwe Mkhwebane has been ordered to pay a fine for her dishonesty. Now, in a totally separate case, President Cyril Ramaphosa has denied claims he deliberately misled Parliament. Our correspondent Nomsa Maseko sent this update from Pretoria.
South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has vowed to take urgent legal action against the country's corruption watchdog's findings of dishonesty and money laundering against him.
The findings of the public protector that she has made against me are very serious. They allege conduct that cannot and should not be taken lightly by anyone in our country.
In a Sunday night press conference, Mr. Ramaphosa was scathing about the claim that he deliberately misled Parliament about a donation he received from a controversial company when he was campaigning to be the president of the ruling African National Congress.
After careful study, I have concluded that the report is fundamentally and irretrievably flawed. The report contains numerous factual inaccuracies of a material nature. The findings we have found are wrong in law, are irrational, and in some instances exceed the scope of the powers of the public protector.
Meanwhile, the president's critics, including opposition party Economic Freedom Fighters, have asked the president to step down until the matter is resolved. In a separate and unrelated finding involving the public protector, South Africa's Constitutional Court has ruled that the corruption watchdog Busisiwe Mkhwebane lied under oath and acted in bad faith. This latest ruling will no doubt add weight to allegations that the public protector is not politically neutral and that she's taking instructions from an ANC faction linked to former President Jacob Zuma. But this claim has been denied by the corruption watchdog. Nomsa Maseko, BBC News, Pretoria.
Let's now take a quick look at other stories making headlines across Africa. At least 17 people have been killed and over 30 wounded after a car bomb exploded at a security checkpoint in the Somali capital, Mogadishu. A loud blast was followed by gunfire. The Islamist militant group Al-Shabaab are claiming responsibility. The Democratic Republic of Congo's Health Minister, Oli Ilunga, has resigned. He stepped down in protest at the presidency's decision to take control of the response to the Ebola outbreak in the east of the country. The Health Ministry had been in charge of it. Now, the outbreak is the second deadliest in history. This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News. Still to come, we have a special report on the challenges faced by disabled people in Senegal. Are they getting the support they are promised? I'm Sophie Ikenya and you're watching Focus on Africa from BBC World News. The top stories on this program. Kenya's Finance Minister Henry Rotich has been arrested for alleged corruption. The Director of Public Prosecution wants the minister and other officials charged for fraud. And clashes have taken place in Abuja between Nigerian police and members of the Muslim Shia group, that's the Islamic Movement of Nigeria. Now, Tanzania has been marking the 60th anniversary since the discovery of what's believed to be the world's oldest fully preserved skull of Aleman. The ceremony was held at Olduvai George, that's a conservation area where the skull was found. The BBC's Abubakar Famau attended the celebration and sent this report.
This is the Olduvai Gorge, a historical site where archaeologist Mary Leakey and her husband used to live. It is here where the discovery of Zinjanthropus was made some 60 years ago. Experts argue that the discovery was a breakthrough that changed people's perception towards man's evolution. The country's Prime Minister Kassim Majaliwa graced the occasion, and he emphasized on the need for research. He also promised to solve some of the challenges that the local communities are facing.
I'll come and talk to citizens and explain to them the importance of this area, your importance as citizens and the significance of these resources, so that we may all have a common understanding and work together, so that we can preserve what we have today.
This area is also unique in the sense that, besides being a home to several historical sites, it is also one of the conservation areas where human beings and animals share the same ecology. This place has not only become a tourist destination, but a center for research, since scientists feel there is still more to be discovered.
We're doing more investigation about the impact or the influence of climate change to human evolution. You can see that at this site we have different type of hominids evolving through time, morphologically and in terms of technology, stone tool technology.
Abubakar Famau, BBC.
Zambia's Information Minister has defended the role of the country's independent broadcast authority in regulating the country's media. There have been complaints that the IBA is interfering with media independence by demanding all stations submit recordings of their programs every 2 weeks. Dora Silia told me why the IBA is doing that and the challenges facing the media industry in Zambia.
This is the first time in Zambia we're having a conversation about journalists coming together and saying, look, we are a profession. This is not just a job you do because you failed everywhere else. It requires a specific training. It requires a specific way to actually conduct the craft, and that it is just not anything anybody can do. What we've been saying to them, especially myself as Minister of Information and Broadcasting, has been that come together. Set the standards, because then you protect your craft, just like the lawyers have done in Zambia, just like the teachers have done in Zambia and other professions.
Minister, questions have been asked about the role of the Independent Broadcasting Authority and why it appears to be overstepping its boundaries, really, or its mandate. For instance, for the authority to tell electronic media companies to submit recorded material every 2 weeks, People don't really understand the reasoning behind that.
It's very strange for me because since in the last 5 years, the Independent Broadcasting Authority has grown the industry by providing over 45 television licenses. We only had one public broadcaster. We now have 142 radio licenses. We only had one at one point.
That's not my question. My question is, do they have the mandate to demand
They
recordings?
do have the mandate because in Article Section 38 of their Act, it actually provides that all radio stations or TV stations should first of all keep 3 months broadcasting material. But secondly, that the board of the IBA will demand this recordings.
On what conditions?
Well,
under what conditions? Is it investigations or is it procedural?
The law, it is procedural, provided for by the law. Look, the IBA is a creature of the law. It did not just create itself. And as such, it has, it is provided for in the IBA Act that they can demand from broadcasters, radio and television for recordings. And that, in fact, broadcasters should keep these recordings 3 months. The law does not provide for when or how the board should be able to demand.
Why is it being enforced now? Because this letter that was sent to companies was done recently. Why now? Why not before?
Well, I mean, the point is that the IBA wants to execute its mandate better, and there's no better time than now. And out of 142 radio stations, in fact, I think over 100 have been responding every 2 weeks in providing this information. So I think that they're doing a good job.
The state broadcaster?
Yes.
When was the last time it actually interviewed an opposition member or an opposition official live on television?
Well, I think that just 2-3 weeks ago, my permanent secretary made a statement publicly that, look, he was actually encouraging our own public broadcaster to be able to interview all citizens.
The state broadcaster does not put the opposition members on air?
Actually, I think that at this point, the opposition members do not want to go to the public broadcaster because they know they'll be asked the right questions and there will be no room for sensationalism.
Zambia's Information Minister Dora Cilia. You're watching BBC Focus on Africa. It's time now for some sport. Peter.
Many thanks, Sophie. And it seems like the controversy that followed the cooperation agreement between the Confederation of African Football and FIFA is far from over. Liberia's former Football Association president, Musa Bility, says he will file a case at the Court of Arbitration for Sports. Bility and a few other of his colleagues in the CAF Executive Committee are unhappy with what they see as a FIFA takeover of the African body. In a statement, he said he will file a case imminently seeking to have the agreement made null and void with immediate effect. The recent agreement will see FIFA Secretary General Fatma Samura work with CAF as a general delegate to Africa. Now, Hervé Renard has left his post as Morocco head coach after their early exit from the Africa Cup of Nations. Morocco were one of the pre-tournament favourites for Egypt 2019, but suffered a shock penalty shootout defeat by Benin in the last 16. Renard, who won AFCON with Zambia in 2012 and Ivory Coast in 2015, had been in charge of the Atlas Lions since February 2016. He took Morocco from 81st in the FIFA World Rankings to 47th. He becomes the 7th coach to have left his position following the Nations Cup in Egypt, with Javier Aguirre, Emmanuel Amunike, Clarence Seedorf, Sebastian Desabre and Paul Putt, all leaving their post within the last few weeks. Now, Riyad Mahrez has thanked the Algerian people for turning out in their tens of thousands for a victory parade in Algiers at the weekend. They paraded the Africa Cup of Nations trophy through Algiers on an open-top bus painted with 2 golden stars as they marked their second continental title, having beaten Senegal 1-0 in Friday's final. Captain Riyad Mahrez, the Manchester City winger, and his teammates were also greeted by Prime Minister Noureddin Bedoui. Meanwhile, an Egyptian lawyer has submitted an official report to the public prosecutor asking Riyad Mahrez to be banned from the country after Algeria's 1-0 win over Senegal in the final. A video circulated online showing Mahrez shaking hands with a line of dignitaries, but not Egypt's Prime Minister Mustafa Madouli, which the lawyer claims was intentional and amounts to disrespect of a public figure. Nigeria's Alex Iwobi has rubbished reports in the British newspapers that claim he'll be looking for a move away from Arsenal if the club signs Wilfred Zaha from Crystal Palace. The Ivorian is on Arsenal's list of targets in this transfer window, but Iwobi has accused the papers of twisting his words and said on social media, "I hope we sign world-class players as Arsenal bid to progress as a team." Iwobi joined Arsenal as a 9-year-old and has come through the club's Hale End Academy before breaking into the first team in 2015. And finally, it was ready, steady, slow at the Snail Racing Championship last weekend in Congham near Sandringham here in the UK, with 215 entries taking part. I can't believe I'm actually telling you this story. The event sees snails race to reach the outside of a 13-inch course. It's been held for the past 50 years. This year's winner was a snail called Sammy, which slimed its way to victory in 2 minutes, 38 seconds. Its owner, Mariah Welby, said afterwards, "It's a great day for me and all female snails." You know what? I bet I can run faster than those snails.
What do you expect me to say? At least they're running in a straight line, which is very important. Wow. Right now, this week we are looking at disability in Africa, and we start off in Senegal. If you live with a disability there, you are meant to have a card to equal opportunity, guaranteeing access to benefits like grants, health insurance, and free public transport. But the government says 50,000 cards were distributed between 2014 and 2018. While they're supposed to provide a safety net for those who are most vulnerable, many challenges remain. Our correspondent Louise Dewast reports from Dakar.
Mariama Telly Diallo struggles to walk. She works on a public bus in Dakar, checking passenger tickets. Getting a job wasn't easy for her.
I've been looking for a job since I was a student. I finished school in 2007 and started studying in 2010. I looked for a job for 4 years and couldn't find any until I found one here.
This bus company says it's one of few trying to fulfill its legal quota of 15% employees with a disability. They're also working on easier access and say a third of their buses are equipped with a ramp like this one. Passengers with a disability can also travel for free if they have a transport card. To get it, they first need to apply for an Equal Opportunity Card. The Equal Opportunity Card is part of the government's efforts to help disabled people. But like the quota system, this initiative has problems, not least the fact that only 50,000 cards have been distributed in a country with an estimated 1.5 million disabled people.
If you don't have the card, then there is no proof for the government that they need to support you. I think there are problems with this card of equal opportunity. We need to talk about it. The government should take charge and review it.
Mati Thiam, who had polio as a child, receives just over $40 from the government every 3 months thanks to the card. But for a 37-year-old with an education, the challenges she faces are too great.
It's going to be difficult for me because if I don't find a job, I won't eat so that I can pay my rent. I finished this month. I'm not sure I will find a job or paid internship for August, so it's going to be very difficult for me.
The government says they are making 10,000 new cards each year, but is it enough? A law was introduced to protect disabled people in Senegal 10 years ago, but it hasn't been fully implemented yet. As a result of slow change, life continues to be an uphill battle for those like Mati who live with a disability.
Louise Devast reporting there. Now, that is part of a series looking at disability in Africa. On Tuesday, we'll be looking at a Somali disabled refugee who became a European basketball champion. Don't forget, you can get in touch with me and some of the team on Twitter. I'm @CKenye. Thanks for your company.